Now that I'm 32, I wake up to a vibrant garden that I created every day. My grandmother's final gift to me was my small, comfortable home surrounded by flowers and foliage. This location is more than simply a piece of land and a structure. It's a monument to a struggle I've waged against my own blood since I was a young child. Being the proprietor of the neighborhood eatery was more than simply a profession to our family. It was an identity that was inherited like a holy torch. Mike, my brother, was all over it like a fish in water. Me, my parents, and Mike said I was the odd one out, the black sheep with her head in the ground, literally. They would scoff. A gardener, as though the phrase left them with a terrible taste in their mouths. Talks over dinner were a minefield. "Eva, you look so beautiful." At the dinner table, dirt under your nails. "That's not right," my father would complain, his displeasure weighing as much as his palm on the back of my seat. Mom would nod, her gaze flitting from mine to Mike's tidy, well-groomed hands. "Eva, he is correct. You are no longer a child. It's time you stopped playing in the mud and started considering your future in the restaurant." Grandma was the only one who understood, the one person who regarded the dirt beneath my nails as a badge of honor rather than a sign of disobedience. She served as my safe haven during the storm. She would interject, "Let the girl be," her tone steady yet firm, against the growing wave of disillusionment from my parents. "Don't you see that she has a gift? This isn't just dirt," she would say, waving her hand over the garden. "This is life. This is passion." It was Grandma who first introduced me to the joys of gardening. She would converse with plants as if they were old acquaintances, each with its own peculiarities and requirements. I felt liberated and understood in her garden, where we would spend hours together. She even brought me to flower shows, where I was able to witness the wonders that could be produced using only dirt, seeds, and love. She would exclaim, "Look at this, Eva," gesturing to an especially beautiful display. "You could perform even better at this. You have both the heart and the sight for it." However, at home, Grandma's support was like a yell overshadowed by a murmur. Mike and my parents thought that my passion for gardening was just a passing phase that I would ultimately grow out of. However, I was aware of this. It was where I belonged, the sensation of dirt between my fingers, the excitement of watching something grow out of nothing. I was planting some new plants I'd chosen one day when Mike appeared, leaning against the doorframe with that certain expression. "Are you really going to keep doing this? Have fun like a child in the dirt. When will you become sincere, Eva?" I recall gazing up at him, rebellious, my face smeared with dirt. "This is serious, Mike, more than you'll ever understand." Like everyone else, he simply shook his head and left, leaving me to continue with my childish interests. Their looks and remarks didn't make it easy for me to give it up. It was a part of who I was, not just a desire, and every flowering plant and every altered piece of land I worked on was a silent triumph. You would have thought I had declared I was relocating to Mars the day I told my family I was going to start a landscaping business instead of working in the family restaurant. Mom's face turned scarlet, just like a ripe tomato. "Dad," he simply appeared to have ingested something acidic. "You're doing what now?" Mom's hands were all over the place like stray birds trying to get away, and her voice reached octaves I had no idea existed. I tried to maintain my composure as I said, "I want to be a landscape designer. It's what I love, what I'm good at." Dad gave the silverware a violent smack on the table. "Gardening? That's not my daughter's kind of job. You should assist in managing the eatery." This is absurd. Although it was not surprising, their response nonetheless hurt. Grandma intervened at that point, her soothing voice cutting through the tense situation. "Let's all just pause for a moment, please. Eva obviously has a gift, and she is quite passionate about it. Why not give her an opportunity to clarify?" I wrote everything down, including how it felt to have dirt beneath my nails, how satisfying it was to watch something I had planted develop, and all of the ideas that were just waiting to be realized. I talked about the plants I wanted to explore, the colors and textures, and the imaginary garden I had created for Grandma's backyard. Grandma had a slight smile on her face as I saw her nod. However, Mom and Dad, it appeared as though they were watching an unsubtitled foreign movie. Dad finally gave me a warning. "It's the door or the restaurant," he stated, his voice as icy as ice. Grandma, God bless her, grabbed my hand at that point. She declared, "She'll stay with me," and that was that. The very following day, I moved in with her. The home of Grandma was a refuge. Every day we dug, planted, and designed in the garden. She gave me advice, listened to my ideas, and together we designed a place that reflected our respective spirits. She stated to Eva, "You know you've got something special," while she was digging her hands into the ground on one of those days. "Your affection for this, you will go someplace with it." Then an incredible thing transpired. Grandma's next-door neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had noticed us at work and asked if I might help with her sad excuse for a garden. I leaped at the opportunity. I gave it my all because it was my first serious project. Something else happened when Mrs. Henderson's desolate plot was transformed into a colorful, alive sanctuary. She gave me $500 because she was so happy. My very first payment for doing what I loved was something I couldn't believe. Grandma proudly responded, "I told you," her eyes glistening. "You're going to make a name for yourself." Me and her decided to celebrate alone in the neighborhood cafe. Despite being a small gathering, it had the atmosphere of a victory party. We discussed our next major project, her garden's focal point, while enjoying coffee and cake. "To your first job," Granny said, lifting her coffee cup in celebration. "To many more," I answered, feeling lighter than I have in a long time from my family's expectations. While I laid in my former room at Grandma's that night, I came to a realization. This was only the start. I felt like I was finally where I was meant to be for the first time in my life, even if the road ahead was unknown and even frightening. It was like traveling to another planet to pursue a career in landscape design after moving to the city. I felt aliver than ever as I absorbed all the beauty and wisdom I could. Grandma was my rock through it all. Whether I was at home for the holidays or we were just catching up over the phone, we would talk for hours on end. She was always interested in learning about my studies, my projects, and the new plants I could not stop talking about. But what about Mike, Mom, and Dad? Radio silence. It was as though I had disappeared from their lives the instant I made my decision. Then Grandma went away and everything was different. Like a freight train, it struck me. She was my strongest ally and my rock. The final time I saw my family was at the funeral, when I found out that Grandma had left me everything, including her home, garden, and some savings. Even though no one else did, she had faith in me and my dream. But that's when the storm hit. My family, already distant, turned colder. They had plans for Grandma's house, dreams of selling it to pour money into the restaurant. When they found out about the will, all hell broke loose. "You can't be serious." Dad bellowed over the phone when I told them I was keeping the house and using Grandma's savings to fund my career. "That money, that house, it's meant for the family, for the restaurant." Mom's voice was no less fierce. "How can you be so selfish? Your grandmother would be ashamed of you, hoarding everything for yourself." Even Mike, who rarely got involved, chimed in. "Come on, Eva, don't do this to the family. We need that money." Their words stung, but I stood my ground. Grandma believed in me, in what I'm doing. She wanted me to have the house, to make something of myself. I'm honoring her wishes, whether you like it or not. The line went silent for a moment before Dad's voice cut through, colder than I'd ever heard it. "If you go through with this, don't bother calling us your family anymore. You're on your own, Eva." And just like that, the decision was made for me. I lost more than Grandma that day. I lost my family. But in the midst of that loss, I found a resolve I didn't know I had. So I poured myself into my work, into transforming her garden into a tribute to her memory. It wasn't just about plants and designs. It was about proving to myself and maybe to them, that I could make it on my own, that I was more than just a family outcast, more than just a gardener. Years rolled by thick and fast, like seasons changing in my garden. My old but snug grandma's house became a slice of paradise. Friends became my new family, filling the house with laughter and warmth, especially during our legendary barbecue nights. Then, out of the blue, a wedding invitation landed in my mailbox. It was from my brother, Mike, a wedding at the family restaurant, the very place I drifted apart from what used to be my family. My heart sank a little, memories both sweet and sour bubbling up. "I can't believe Mike's getting hitched," I mumbled to myself, flipping the invitation in my hands. That evening, my backyard was buzzing with the usual suspects, my friends grilling and chilling. I tossed the invitation on the table, a silent announcement. "You gotta go," Jess said, snagging a burnt sausage off the grill, her words blunt, no room for argument. "Yeah, show him how you flourished, Eva, like one of your gardens," added Sam, his grin encouraging but knowing the turmoil I felt. I sighed, the weight of the decision pressing down on me, but stepping back there after everything. "It's not about them, Eva. It's about closure for you, and who knows, maybe a fresh start," Jess nudged, always the optimist. Their words, a mix of wisdom and whiskey, finally got to me. "All right, I'll go. For Grandma, if nothing else," I conceded, my voice a mix of determination and dread. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. I found myself in front of a mirror, trying on a dress that felt like armor. It was beautiful in a way that whispered confidence and grace, not just to the world but to me too. "I'm doing this," I whispered to my reflection, a promise to the woman staring back. Choosing a gift for Mike was another battle. What do you gift someone who's drifted so far away they're more a memory than a brother? In the end, I settled on a rare plant, a symbol of growth and resilience, something only I would give, a nod to our shared past and my unyielding love for green and growing things. The family restaurant, decked out in garish decorations, felt both familiar and alien. I'd hoped for a fresh start, or at least some semblance of civility. That hope shattered the moment I caught sight of my family. Mike spotted me first. "Well, ain't this a surprise? Thought you'd be too busy playing in the dirt to remember your only brother's wedding," he said loud enough for a circle of guests to hear, his smirk wide and unwelcoming. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Congratulations, Mike. Wishing you both the best." My attempt at diplomacy fell flat, his smirk turning into a sneer. Mom and Dad were next, their expressions a mix of shock and disapproval. "Eva, you actually came. Thought you'd consider this too mundane for your exquisite tastes," Mom said, her voice laced with sarcasm, barely concealing her disdain. Dad's eyes scanned me from head to toe, his disappointment palpable. "Hope you've left your garden long enough to remember how to behave at a family event," he added, his tone harsh and unforgiving. Then came Mike's fiancée, Clara, eyeing me like I was a specimen rather than a person. "So you're the infamous sister. Mike said you'd rather plant flowers than be part of the family." "Can't say he was wrong," she said, her voice dripping with contempt, her hand resting possessively on Mike's arm. The conversation around us paused, the guests' attention now fixed on the unfolding drama. I felt their stares, curious and judgmental, as if I were an exhibit on display. Trying to salvage some dignity, I responded, "Just wanted to wish you both happiness, that's all." But the barbs kept coming. "Make sure you don't dirty up the place, gardener. Wouldn't want the guests thinking we let just anyone in," Mike quipped, the guests around him chuckling uncomfortably. Feeling smaller by the second, I was directed to a table in the corner, away from the family, away from any semblance of belonging. The table was clearly an afterthought, barely decorated and awkwardly positioned. As I took my seat, the whispers grew louder, the glances more pitying. I heard she chose weeds over family. Someone whispered not too far from me. "Imagine missing out on real life because you prefer dirt," Another snickered. The laughter and music swelled, a stark contrast to the coldness at my solitary corner. I was an outsider here, surrounded by people who knew me only by the scornful stories they'd heard. As the wedding dragged on, with me tucked away in my corner like an afterthought, the atmosphere started to shift. The night was filled with the usual wedding fare, dancing, toasts, and a bit too much alcohol for some. Yet amidst the revelry, an unexpected moment of redemption emerged, catching me off guard. It happened just as I was contemplating making my quiet exit, unnoticed and unmissed. The mayor of our town, a guest of honor due to his ties with the bride's family, took to the stage for his speech. His presence was a big deal, lending a certain prestige to the event. I'd met him a few times professionally, given my work on several city park projects, but I doubted he'd remember me. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice commanding attention. The room hushed, glasses pausing midair as everyone turned to listen. As he spoke about community and coming together, his gaze suddenly found mine. He asked Mike and his fiancée with a puzzled look, "Why is the famous landscape designer sitting all by herself, like she's been put into timeout?" Mike and Clara glanced at each other, clearly clueless. That's when the mayor pointed straight at me. You could have heard a pin drop. My family looked like they'd seen a ghost. The mayor beckoned me over. "Folks, we're lucky tonight. Right here, we've got the talent behind our city's most beautiful parks. Not to mention she just snagged a cool $300,000 from the city for her next project." Applause filled the room, echoing off the walls as I made my way to the front. I took the mic, feeling a mix of pride and nerves. "Thanks, Mr. Mayor," I started. "It's all about making our city a better place, one garden at a time." Then, turning to my family, I couldn't help but add, "Mike, Clara, congrats. Seems like you two are a perfect match." A light jab at their earlier coldness. To my parents, I said, "Hope you're not too embarrassed by your gardener daughter now." Their faces were a picture of shock and burning shame. The room was buzzing, whispers spreading like wildfire. I could feel the shift in the air, the looks of surprise and newfound respect from the guests. I returned to my table, no longer the outcast, but the evening's unexpected star. The mayor and a few other city bigwigs joined me, their interest genuine. The night took on a new flavor, conversation swirling around future projects and the sudden spotlight on me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like just the odd one out in my family. I was Eva, the landscape designer who'd carved her own path, one that even the mayor admired. And as for my family, well, let's just say the evening gave them a lot to think about. The evening of my brother's wedding unfolded into something far beyond the awkward family reunion I'd anticipated. Surrounded by the city's elite, I found myself in deep conversation with the mayor and others about the potential for new ambitious landscaping projects throughout the city. His enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment, I allowed myself to dream bigger than I ever had before. "Eva, your vision for the new park downtown is exactly what we need to breathe life back into that area," the mayor said, his eyes alight with excitement. "Your ability to see the beauty in neglected spaces is remarkable." "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe every corner of our city has potential. It's just about finding the right way to bring it out," I replied, feeling a swell of pride. The conversations didn't stop there. The head of the local TV channel, intrigued by my story, pitched the idea of a feature segment. "Eva, your journey from a misunderstood gardener to a celebrated landscape designer is inspiring. How do you feel about sharing your story with our viewers, showing them how following your passion can lead to unexpected success?" he suggested, his camera crew already imagining the shots. "I'm humbled, really. If my story can inspire even one person to follow their heart, it would be worth it," I answered, the reality of my influence beginning to dawn on me. As the night wore on, the mayor's disappointment in his niece and my family's behavior became unmistakably clear. His confrontation with Clara was a moment of vindication I hadn't known I needed. Clara, I expected better. The way you and your new family have treated Eva is unacceptable. I cannot, in good conscience, support the restaurant financially or otherwise. Respect and kindness are values we should all uphold, he stated firmly, leaving Clara and my brother visibly shaken. Riding the wave of the evening's revelations, I returned home with my head full of possibilities and my heart light. Despite the undercurrents of family drama, that lightness was short-lived, however, as Mike's unexpected visit a week later brought me crashing back to reality. Eva, we're struggling. The restaurant? We're in deep. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. Can you help us out? Mike's request was desperate, his pride swallowed by necessity. Mike, coming here asking for money now after everything, you really don't get it, do you? I built my life, my career on my own despite how you all treated me. No, I won't bail you out, I said, my voice steady, my resolve unwavering. His departure was followed by a call from our parents. Their tones were sugary, their intentions transparent. Eva, sweetheart, we've been thinking about you, how successful you've become. We're so proud. Maybe you could share a bit of that success, help the family business. They cooed, their words dripping with insincerity. You think you can ignore me, belittle my passion, and then, when I make something of myself, you call to ask for money? I'm doing well. Thanks for finally noticing, but I won't be your safety net. Goodbye, I replied, hanging up with a mix of anger and liberation. The chapter of seeking approval from those who never understood me was closing. Ahead lay a path filled with potential, paved by my own achievements and the respect of those who truly valued my work. It's often said that life has an odd way of coming full circle. Brick by symbolic brick, my family's restaurant was collapsing while I was out there planting roots. As it happens, the opulent way of life and the false impression of wealth that Mike and my parents were determined to uphold were only delusions. They had not been making investments in the company. Rather, they were squandering money on ostentatious gadgets and ostentatious means to flaunt their status. Ultimately, the restaurant failed, taking them down with it, submerged in debt and dashed hopes. The rift did not last in Mike's marriage. Clara was not going to be there to witness his fall from grace. She had married him believing she was getting the future king of the neighborhood eating scene. With no wife or restaurant to call his own, just a mountain of debt and regret, she abandoned him to flounder in the chaos that had become his life. However, everything was blossoming splendidly on my end. Orders were coming in left and right. I was on speed dial with the mayor's office, trying to green every inch of our town. Not only that, but private clients also desired a share of the enchantment. My schedule was a vibrant jumble of tasks, events, and gatherings with some of the most intriguing people I had ever encountered. As soon as the TV commercial went on, I was no longer just the neighborhood gardener turned hero. Instead, I became a legend and an inspiration to anyone who dared to have wilder dreams. People adored it and showered my social media accounts with encouragement, sharing their own tales of pursuing their aspirations in the face of adversity. One day, as she was grinning and thumbing through her phone, my assistant Lucy, a bright-eyed green thumb, asked me, "Did you see the comments on that post? You're like a celebrity now." I shook my head and laughed, all because I like playing in the dirt. As always, Lucy reminded me of the greater picture. "It's more than that, and you know it," she shot back. "You're encouraging folks to pursue their passions. That is very significant." Of course, she was correct. What began in my grandmother's backyard has developed into something I never would have thought possible. And speaking of Grandma, I couldn't go a day without thinking of her. Her faith in me was evident in every arrangement of plants I made and every sketch I created. Regarding my family, well, we were silent for a long time. After all of that, they were too proud, or maybe too ashamed, to ask for help. The same grapevine that probably told me about my triumphs also told me about their troubles. I had a thought one peaceful evening as I was looking over the blueprints for a new community garden. They were still my family in spite of the hurt, the distance, and the very different roads our lives had gone. Perhaps it was time to reach out and provide an olive branch, not because they necessarily deserved it, but because clinging to resentment was like allowing weeds to overrun a garden. After giving it some thought, I took up my phone and dialed Mike's number. After ringing nonstop, it finally said, "Hello. This is Eva, Mike. I've been considering. Perhaps it's time for us to speak, really communicate." After one or two beats, without saying anything, the line said, "Yeah, maybe it is." Though clumsy and stilted, the chat was a start, a seed sown in the direction of something new. I tried, so maybe it would grow, maybe it wouldn't. Meanwhile, I had to plan gardens, tend to dreams, and create a legacy that my grandmother would have been proud of.
The clatter of my ceramic mug hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the kitchen, hot coffee splashing across my bare feet, but I barely noticed the scalding liquid. My eyes were fixed on the letter in my trembling hands, its contents shattering my world into 1,000 pieces. "Rachel? Everything okay down there?" Mike's voice drifted from upstairs, tinged with mild concern. I swallowed hard, quickly stuffing the letter back into the envelope. "Fine," I called back, my voice unnaturally high. Just dropped my coffee. As I bent to clean up the mess, my mind raced. Who was Lydia, and why was she writing such intimate letters to my husband? The sound of Mike's footsteps on the stairs jolted me back to reality. I hastily shoved the envelope into my apron pocket just as he appeared in the doorway. "Geez, Rach, what happened?" He surveyed the scene, his brow furrowed. I forced a smile. "Butterfingers, I guess. Don't worry, I've got it under control." Mike shrugged, already losing interest. "All right, I'm heading out. Big meeting today." As he turned to leave, I blurted out, "Who's Lydia?" He froze, his back to me. For a moment, the only sound was the drip of the coffee maker. Then he slowly pivoted, his face a mask of confusion. "Lydia? I don't know any Lydia." The lie hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream, to confront him with the evidence burning a hole in my pocket, but something held me back. Maybe it was the fear of what would happen if I did. Or maybe it was the sudden realization that I needed more information before I made my next move. "Oh," I said lightly, "must have been thinking of someone else. Have a good day, honey." Mike's shoulders visibly relaxed. He gave me a quick peck on the cheek and headed out the door. As soon as I heard his car pull away, I sank to the floor, my back against the kitchen island. The letter felt like it was searing my skin through the fabric of my apron. With shaking hands, I pulled it out and read it again, hoping I'd somehow misunderstood. But the words were clear. "My dearest Mike, last night was magical. I can't wait to see you again." The rest of the letter was a blur of intimate details and future plans. Plans that didn't include me or our daughter, Amelia. The shrill ring of the phone startled me out of my daze. I scrambled to my feet, composing myself before answering. "Rachel, it's your mother-in-law." Mrs. Grant's crisp voice cut through the line. "I trust you remember the charity luncheon this afternoon?" I closed my eyes, suppressing a groan. "Of course, Mrs. Grant, wouldn't miss it." "Excellent, and do make sure Amelia is properly dressed this time. Last month's ensemble was questionable at best." I bit back a retort. "Yes, Mrs. Grant, we'll be there." As I hung up, a wave of rebellion washed over me. Why was I still jumping through hoops for this woman? Why was I pretending everything was fine when my world was crumbling around me? The ding of my laptop interrupted my spiraling thoughts. A notification from my online store, another sale of my handcrafted jewelry. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my lips. My little business, started as a hobby, was beginning to flourish. As I packaged up the order, an idea began to form. Maybe it was time to stop playing by everyone else's rules. Maybe it was time to take control of my own destiny. I glanced at the clock. The luncheon was in 2 hours. Just enough time to set my plan in motion. Picking up my phone, I dialed a number I'd sworn I'd never use. "Hello, is this divorce attorney Johnson's office? I'd like to schedule a consultation." As I hung up, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursed through me. The game was about to change, and this time, I was making the rules. The charity luncheon was in full swing, a sea of pastel suits and pearls. I smoothed down Amelia's dress, silently praying it would meet Mrs. Grant's exacting standards. Rachel, darling. Mrs. Grant's voice cut through the chatter. There you are. And Amelia? Well, I suppose that dress will have to do. I bit my tongue, forcing a smile. Hello, Mrs. Grant. Amelia picked it out herself. Mrs. Grant's lips tightened. Did she now? Well, perhaps it's time we had a talk about proper attire for young ladies. Before I could respond, she whisked Amelia away, leaving me alone in a crowd of Mike's relatives and business associates. I felt like a fish out of water, my mind still reeling from the morning's discovery. Rachel! A shrill voice called out. I turned to see Aunt Mildred waving me over. Come, dear. We were just discussing the upcoming family reunion. I reluctantly joined the group, my stomach churning. Family reunion? This was the first I'd heard of it. Oh yes, Aunt Mildred continued, oblivious to my discomfort. It's going to be quite the affair, a week-long celebration of the Grant family legacy. A week? I echoed, my voice weak. Mrs. Grant suddenly materialized beside me. Of course, dear. Didn't Mike tell you? It's been in the planning for months. I swallowed hard, anger bubbling up inside me. No, Mike hadn't told me, just like he hadn't told me about Lydia. I'm afraid we won't be able to make it, I heard myself say. The words hung in the air, heavy with defiance. Mrs. Grant's eyes narrowed. Nonsense. This is a family obligation. You and Amelia will be there. Actually, I said, my voice growing stronger, Amelia has a school project that week. It's very important for her grade. The lie tasted sweet on my tongue. For once, I was taking control. Mrs. Grant's face darkened. Rachel, I don't think you understand. This reunion is not optional. The entire family will be there, including the board members of Mike's company. Your absence would be noticed. The threat in her voice was clear. I opened my mouth to argue further, but a commotion across the room caught my attention. Amelia was standing by the dessert table, tears streaming down her face as she furiously wiped at a large stain on her dress. I rushed over, my heart pounding. Amelia, sweetie, what happened? I'm sorry, Mom, she sobbed. I didn't mean to. The punch just spilled and... It's okay, honey, I soothed, grabbing napkins to dab at the stain. Accidents happen. Mrs. Grant's voice cut through the moment. Well, I suppose this is what happens when children aren't properly taught etiquette. I whirled around, my patience finally snapping. That's enough. Amelia is a child, not one of your society puppets. She doesn't need your criticism or your outdated rules. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. Mrs. Grant's face turned an alarming shade of red. How dare you speak to me like that, she hissed. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? I laughed bitterly. You mean controlling every aspect of my life? Dictating how I should dress, act, raise my daughter? I grabbed Amelia's hand, suddenly feeling lighter than I had in years. We're leaving, and we won't be at your reunion. As we walked out, I could hear the whispers starting behind us, but for once I didn't care what they thought. In the car, Amelia looked at me with wide eyes. Mom, are we in trouble? I took a deep breath, realizing the magnitude of what I'd just done. No, sweetie, we're not in trouble. We're just making some changes. As I drove home, my phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from Mike, voicemails from Mrs. Grant. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on the road ahead, my mind racing with possibilities. It was time to start living life on my own terms. And the first step? Finding out exactly who this Lydia was. The days following the charity luncheon were a whirlwind of tense silence and barely concealed hostility. Mike's cold shoulder was a stark contrast to Mrs. Grant's incessant phone calls, which I steadfastly ignored. Amelia, caught in the crossfire, grew increasingly withdrawn. One evening, as I sat at my crafting table, meticulously beading a necklace for an online order, Amelia's small voice broke the silence. Mom, why is everyone so angry? I set down my tools, turning to face her. Sometimes, sweetie, grown-ups have disagreements, but it's not your fault, okay? She nodded, unconvinced. Is it because of the luncheon, because I spilled punch on my dress? My heart clenched. No, honey, it's much more complicated than that. Just then, Mike stormed into the room, his face thunderous. Rachel, we need to talk. Now. I glanced at Amelia, who had shrunk back at her father's tone. Sweetie, why don't you go upstairs and start your homework? I'll be up soon. As soon as Amelia was out of earshot, Mike exploded. What the hell were you thinking, embarrassing my mother like that? Do you have any idea what you've done? I stood my ground, anger bubbling up inside me. What I've done? How about what you've done, Mike? Or should I ask Lydia about that? The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? I laughed bitterly. Don't play dumb. I found the letters. How long has it been going on? Mike's shock quickly morphed into defensiveness. That's none of your business. What I do in my private time. None of my business, I interrupted, my voice rising. I'm your wife. Amelia is your daughter. How dare you? Keep your voice down, Mike hissed, glancing nervously at the stairs. Look, what's done is done. But you need to fix things with my mother. The family reunion is important for my career. I stared at him, incredulous. Your career? Is that all you care about? Before he could respond, my phone pinged. Another sale notification from my online store. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my lips. Mike's eyes narrowed. What's that? Another order for your little hobby? The condescension in his voice was the final straw. It's not a hobby, Mike. It's a business. My business. And it's doing quite well, actually, he scoffed. Please, those trinkets you make? That's not a real job. Something inside me snapped. No? Well, this hobby of mine made more last month than your precious job did. The shock on Mike's face was almost comical. What? That's impossible. I pulled out my phone, showing him the sales figures. His eyes widened in disbelief. I don't need your money anymore, Mike, and I certainly don't need your mother's approval. Just then, Amelia's voice floated down from upstairs. Mom, can you help me with my math homework? I turned to go, but Mike grabbed my arm. This conversation isn't over, Rachel. You can't just walk away from your family obligations. I wrenched my arm free. Watch me. As I climbed the stairs, my mind was racing. I knew this was far from over. Mrs. Grant wouldn't let go without a fight, and Mike, well, Mike had made his priorities clear. I paused outside Amelia's room, taking a deep breath to compose myself. As I pushed open the door, I made a silent vow. No matter what it took, I would protect Amelia from this toxic environment, even if it meant leaving everything behind. Amelia looked up as I entered, her eyes wide with worry. Mom, is everything okay? I forced a smile, sitting down beside her. Everything's going to be fine, sweetie. Now, let's take a look at that math homework. As we bent over her textbook, I couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it head-on. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window as I put the finishing touches on a custom-ordered bracelet. The house was quiet, a rare moment of peace in the chaos that had become our lives. I glanced at the clock, realizing Amelia would be home from school soon. As if on cue, I heard the front door slam. But instead of Amelia's usual cheerful greeting, I was met with the sound of muffled sobs. Amelia? I called out, my heart racing as I rushed to the entryway. My daughter stood there, her backpack on the floor, tears streaming down her face. Mom, she choked out, I saw. I pulled her into my arms, stroking her hair. Shh, it's okay. Take a deep breath. What did you see? Amelia pulled back, her eyes red and puffy. I went to surprise Dad at his office. But he was with someone. A woman. They were kissing. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I knew about Lydia, of course, but hearing it from Amelia, seeing the pain in her eyes, it was a whole new level of betrayal. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'm so sorry you had to see that. Amelia's sobs turned to hiccups. Why would Dad do that? Doesn't he love us anymore? The question pierced my heart. How could I explain something I didn't understand myself? Your father loves you very much, I said, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes adults make mistakes, big mistakes. Amelia's eyes narrowed. You knew, didn't you? That's why you and Dad have been fighting. I nodded, unable to lie. I found out recently. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. Were you going to tell me at all? Amelia's voice was sharp, accusatory. The question caught me off guard. Of course I was. I wanted to protect you. Protect me? Amelia scoffed, suddenly sounding much older than her years. By lying to me? By pretending everything was fine. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Had I been so caught up in my own pain that I'd failed to see what was right in front of me? Before I could respond, the front door opened again. Mike walked in, his face falling as he took in the scene before him. What's going on? He asked, his voice wary. Amelia whirled to face him, her grief turning to anger. I saw you. With her. How could you do that to Mom? To us? Mike's face drained of color. Amelia, I can explain. No, I cut in, my voice steely. You don't get to explain. Not now. I turned to Amelia. Sweetie, why don't you go up to your room? I need to talk to your father. For a moment I thought she might refuse, but then she nodded, grabbing her backpack and heading upstairs. The slam of her bedroom door echoed through the house. Mike and I stood in silence, the weight of years of lies and resentment hanging between us. "Rachel," he started, "I never meant for Amelia to find out like this." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, and how exactly did you mean for her to find out, or were you planning on keeping your little affair a secret forever?" Mike's face hardened. "It's not like that, Lydia. She understands me. She doesn't try to change me like you do." His words ignited a fire within me. "Change you? I've spent years molding myself to fit your family's expectations, and this is how you repay me?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You know what? I'm done. Done pretending, done making excuses, done living this lie." Mike's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" I met his gaze, my resolve strengthening with each passing second. "I'm saying it's over, Mike. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. As I watched the shock spread across Mike's face, I realized this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. The word divorce hung in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and ominous. Mike's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally a cold determination that sent chills down my spine. "You can't be serious," he scoffed. "What about Amelia? What about our life together?" I stood my ground, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. "Our life together? You mean the life where I play the perfect wife while you sneak around with Lydia?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Lydia understands me in ways you never could." "Oh, I understand plenty," I shot back. "I understand that you're a liar and a cheat, and I'm done pretending otherwise." Just then, Amelia's bedroom door creaked open. We both froze, realizing our voices had risen to dangerous levels. "Mom? Dad?" Amelia's voice wavered. "Are you guys getting divorced?" The pain in her voice cut through me like a knife. I turned to face her, my heart breaking at the sight of her tear-stained face. "Sweetie," I began, but Mike cut me off. "Of course not," he said smoothly. "Your mother's just upset. We'll work things out." I whirled on him, fury coursing through my veins. "Don't you dare lie to her. Not anymore." Turning back to Amelia, I took a deep breath. "Honey, I don't know what's going to happen, but I promise you, no matter what, I'll always be here for you." Mike's phone buzzed, breaking the tense silence. He glanced at it, his face paling. "I have to go," he muttered, heading for the door. "Let me guess," I called after him. "Lydia needs you." The slam of the front door was his only response. Amelia collapsed into my arms, her body shaking with sobs. As I held her, my mind raced. How had we gotten here? How could I protect her from the storm that was surely coming? The next morning, I woke to the insistent ringing of the doorbell. Groggily, I made my way downstairs, only to find Mrs. Grant on my doorstep, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Rachel," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "We need to talk." Before I could respond, she pushed past me into the house. "I've just had a very interesting conversation with Michael," she began, pacing the living room. "He tells me you're threatening divorce, over some ridiculous notion of infidelity, no less." I felt my anger rising again. "It's not a notion, Mrs. Grant. It's a fact, one that Amelia witnessed firsthand." Mrs. Grant waved her hand dismissively. "Children often misunderstand adult situations, and even if there was some indiscretion, surely you understand the importance of maintaining appearances?" I stared at her, incredulous. "Maintaining appearances? Is that all you care about?" "It's what you should care about," she snapped. "The Grant family name means something in this town. I won't have you dragging it through the mud over some petty marital spat." Something inside me snapped. "Petty? Your son has been cheating on me, lying to me, and you call it petty?" Mrs. Grant's eyes narrowed. "Listen carefully, Rachel. If you go through with this divorce, you'll lose everything. The house, your status, even Amelia. The Grants protect their own, and you're not one of us." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Could she really take Amelia from me? As if sensing my fear, Mrs. Grant pressed on. "Be sensible, dear. Let this foolishness go, and we can all move past it." I stood there, my mind reeling. The thought of losing Amelia was unbearable. But could I really go back to pretending? To living a lie? In that moment, I made my decision. Meeting Mrs. Grant's gaze, I spoke, my voice steady and clear. "Get out of my house." Mrs. Grant's eyes widened in shock. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, my resolve strengthening with each word. Get out and tell Mike he can expect to hear from my lawyer. As I watched Mrs. Grant's retreating form, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. The battle lines were drawn. Now it was time to fight. The divorce papers felt heavy in my hands as I stood outside Mike's office. My heart raced, but I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. This was it, the moment of truth. I pushed open the door without knocking. Mike looked up, surprise quickly morphing into annoyance. "Rachel, what are you doing here? I'm in the middle of—" "We need to talk," I cut him off, dropping the papers on his desk. "Now." Mike's eyes flickered to the documents, realization dawning on his face. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "It's over, Mike. I want a divorce." He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at his lips. "Come on, Rachel. We both know you won't go through with this. What about Amelia? What about our life together?" His dismissive tone ignited a fire within me. "Our life together? You mean the lie we've been living? The one where you sneak around with Lydia while I play the perfect wife?" Mike's face hardened. "You don't understand. Lydia—" "I don't want to hear about Lydia," I snapped. "I want you to face what you've done. To me, to Amelia." "Leave Amelia out of this," Mike growled, standing up. "She has nothing to do with—" "She has everything to do with this," I shouted, my composure finally cracking. "She saw you, Mike, with Lydia. Do you have any idea what that's done to her?" For a moment, genuine shock and remorse flashed across Mike's face, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by a cold determination. "I'll talk to her," he said. "Explain things. She'll understand." I laughed bitterly. "Understand what? That her father is a cheater? That he cares more about his mistress than his family?" Mike slammed his fist on the desk. "Enough! You have no idea what you're talking about. My relationship with Lydia is complicated." "Oh, I'm sure it is," I retorted, "but it's not my problem anymore. Sign the papers, Mike." He glanced at the documents, then back at me. "And if I don't?" "Then I'll see you in court," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why we're divorcing." Mike's face paled. "You wouldn't dare. Think about my career, my reputation." "Your reputation?" I scoffed. "That's all you care about, isn't it? Well, guess what? I don't care anymore. Sign the papers." For a long moment, we stared each other down. Then, with a muttered curse, Mike grabbed a pen and scrawled his signature on the documents. "There," he spat. "Happy now?" A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of anxiety. This was really happening. We were really getting divorced. "It's not about being happy," I said quietly. "It's about doing what's right. For me and for Amelia." As I turned to leave, Mike called out, "You'll regret this, Rachel. You have no idea what you're up against." I paused at the door, looking back at him. "No, Mike, you have no idea what you're up against." I walked out of his office, my head held high, but as I made my way to my car, Mike's words echoed in my mind. What did he mean? What was I up against? My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Grant. "We need to talk. Now." A chill ran down my spine. I had a feeling I was about to find out exactly what Mike meant. As I started the car, I took a deep breath. The real battle was just beginning, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. Because one thing was certain, I wasn't going down without a fight. The Grant family Christmas gathering loomed before me like an impenetrable fortress. I clutched my purse, containing the damning evidence of Mike's affair, as I stood on the doorstep of the opulent mansion. My heart raced, but my resolve was ironclad. Tonight, everything would change. I rang the doorbell, steeling myself for what was to come. Mrs. Grant answered, her face a mask of false cheer. "Rachel, dear," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "We weren't sure you'd make it." I forced a smile. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As I stepped inside, the cacophony of forced laughter and clinking champagne glasses assaulted my senses. I scanned the room, spotting Mike in deep conversation with a group of men I recognized as board members from his company. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. Aunt Mildred bustled over, air-kissing my cheeks. "Rachel, darling, where's little Amelia?" "She's not feeling well," I lied smoothly. In truth, left her with a trusted friend. She didn't need to witness what was about to unfold. As I made my way through the crowd, I overheard snippets of conversation. Such a shame about Rachel and Mike's troubles. Heard she's been difficult lately. Probably just a phase. My blood boiled. They had no idea what was coming. Mrs. Grant clinked her glass, calling for attention. Friends, family, welcome to our annual Christmas celebration. As always, we're so blessed to have you all here. As she droned on about family values and tradition, I felt a presence at my elbow. It was Lydia, looking stunning in a red cocktail dress. "Rachel," she said quietly, "we need to talk." I turned to face her, my voice low and dangerous. "Oh, we'll talk all right, but not just us." Before she could respond, I strode to the center of the room, my heart pounding in my ears. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice cutting through the chatter. "I have something I'd like to say." All eyes turned to me. Mrs. Grant's face tightened with barely concealed anger. "Rachel, dear, this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time," I interrupted. "You all talk about family values and tradition. Well, let me tell you about the Grant family values." I pulled out the letters from my purse, holding them high. These are love letters, not between a husband and wife, but between a cheating husband and his mistress. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Mike started towards me, his face ashen. "Rachel, don't." "For years," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "I've played the perfect wife. I've smiled and nodded and bent over backwards to fit into this family. But no more." I turned to face Mike and Lydia, who stood frozen in shock. "You two deserve each other, but Amelia and I deserve better." Mrs. Grant stepped forward, her voice shrill. "That's enough. How dare you cause such a scene? How dare I laughed bitterly. "How dare you stand by and watch your son destroy his family? How dare you try to bully me into silence?" The room was deathly quiet now, all pretense of festivity gone. I looked around at the shocked faces, feeling a strange sense of liberation. "I'm done," I said firmly. "Done with the lies, done with the manipulation, done with all of it. Mike, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. The rest of you, Merry Christmas." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving chaos in my wake. As I stepped into the cold night air, I heard the explosion of voices behind me. Accusations, denials, shocked exclamations. I got into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. What had I done? The full weight of my actions began to sink in. I just burned every bridge, exposed every secret. There was no going back now. As I drove away from the Grant mansion, tears streaming down my face, I realized I was laughing. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head on. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But I'd fired the first shot, and there was no turning back now. 6 months after that fateful Christmas party, I stood in my new workshop, surrounded by the fruits of my labor. Delicate necklaces, intricate bracelets, and stunning earrings filled every surface. My online business had exploded, fueled in part by the publicity from my very public stand against Mike and the Grant family. The bell above the door chimed, and Amelia burst in, her face flushed with excitement. "Mom, you won't believe what happened at school today," I smiled, setting down the piece I was working on. "What is it, sweetie?" "Remember that essay contest I told you about? The one about overcoming adversity?" Her eyes sparkled. "I won first place. They want me to read it at the school assembly next week." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's amazing, Amelia. I'm so proud of you." As she chattered on about her plans for the assembly, I marveled at the change in her. Gone was the withdrawn, anxious girl from 6 months ago. In her place stood a confident, vibrant young woman. The shop door opened again, and I tensed instinctively. But it was just Sarah, my new assistant, laden with shipping boxes. "Hey, Rachel," she called out. "You're not going to believe this. We just got an order for 500 custom pieces for a major department store." I gasped, my mind reeling at the implications. This could be the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. As I helped Sarah unpack, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mike. "We need to talk about the custody arrangement. Can we meet?" A familiar knot formed in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. I'd faced worse and come out stronger. "Everything okay, Mom?" Amelia asked, noticing my expression. I smiled reassuringly. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just your dad wanting to talk." Amelia's face clouded briefly, but she nodded. "You know, I've been thinking, maybe I could see him sometime, if you're okay with it." Her words caught me off guard. We'd had a rough few months after the divorce, with Amelia refusing to see Mike at all. But now, "If that's what you want, we can arrange it," I said carefully. "But only if you're sure." Amelia nodded, her expression resolute. "I am. I think I'm ready to face him." In that moment, I saw a strength in my daughter that I'd always hoped she'd find, a strength that mirrored my own journey. As we closed up shop that evening, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past 6 months. The bitter custody battle, the attempts by Mrs. Grant to discredit me, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made the right choice. But looking at Amelia now, seeing the success of my business, feeling the love and support of true friends I'd made along the way, I knew I'd made the right decision. Later that night, as Amelia slept peacefully in her room, I sat on our small balcony gazing at the stars. My phone buzzed again, another text from Mike. This time I didn't hesitate. I typed out a response. "Yes, we can meet, but on my terms this time." As I hit send, a sense of calm washed over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more subjugation. I thought back to that terrified woman who'd found those letters all those months ago. She seemed like a stranger now. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who fought for what she believed in, who'd created a life filled with love, respect, and endless possibilities. The future stretched out before me, bright and full of promise. There would be struggles, of course, but I was no longer afraid. I had found my voice, my strength, my true self. And nothing, not Mike, not Mrs. Grant, not anyone, could ever take that away from me again. As the cool night breeze caressed my face, I smiled. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. My beginning, our beginning. And I couldn't wait to see what came next.
Hey guys, I am Tina, a 28-year-old woman. I'm here to share my story about how my husband and in-laws were served what they deserved. This happened a few months back, and the entire fiasco just died down recently. I'm still reeling from the emotional trauma, and thought sharing my story would help. 2 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I married my then-boyfriend, Jake. Jake and I met through mutual friends and had been together for 3 years. He seemed to be a very fun and caring person who loved me to bits. He came from a wealthy family and also had a high-paying job. We immediately clicked due to our love for traveling, and soon we were seriously dating. All my friends thought he was a great guy and were genuinely happy about us. The relationship itself was super smooth. He was extremely caring and often gave me gifts to cheer me up on bad days. He even got me a new laptop on the day I graduated college. We often planned trips, and he insisted on paying for most of our expenses. Initially, I was extremely uncomfortable with Jake paying for me. "Jake, you know I'm just a college student. I don't have much money to gift you good things. At least let us split the other expenses." "There's no need for splitting everything, Tina. You know I love you and I like to splurge on my girlfriend. Most of my friends pay for their girlfriend, so it's not a big deal. You need to loosen up a bit." Although Jake paid for a lot of our dates, I was still mindful of getting him gifts and taking him out on dates. They weren't as fancy as his gifts, but they were all I could afford back then. When I graduated college, I landed a very good job with great pay. I was super excited that I could finally pamper Jake with gifts and fancy dates. We even began splitting expenses evenly and were deciding to move in together. "You can just move in with me, you know. I have a house which was my inheritance from Grandpa. You won't even have to pay rent since it's already fully paid for. If you insist, then it's fine. However, for everything else, we will split the expenses evenly. I don't earn as much as you, but it would be unfair if you pay more. You really don't have to, you know. I want to take care of you, but if you feel like splitting everything, I don't mind it that much." Everything was going pretty well until I finally met his family. His family actually lives in a different state that is pretty far away. Jake was stuck here because of his work. Before meeting his parents, Jake told me that they can be a little judgmental at times. When I asked him what he meant, he didn't give me a straight answer. Jake just told me to play along with him and ignore them if they say anything mean. While I was not too thrilled with this disclaimer, I tried to keep a positive mind. Every bit of positivity vanished when I finally met them. His parents and his sister were the ones who flew to meet us. Jake went to the airport to pick them up. I don't know what happened on the way, but when they arrived, they looked pretty annoyed. We sat down together and started to have a chat. I soon realized that they did not like me at all. Sandra and Dave, Jake's parents, said, "So you are the woman Jake has been seeing. I definitely did not expect to see you in this house. Do you even pay rent?" "No, Sandra. I don't pay rent here. Jake told me that the house is already fully paid for, so I didn't need to pay rent, but we split all the bills evenly. Just because the house is paid for does not mean you can mooch off of him. This is his house and not yours. I hope you understand that and remember it for the rest of your life." I immediately felt weirded out by the conversation. Cassie didn't even try to talk to me. Instead, she kept glaring at me the entire time. When I asked Cassie about her life, she irritably said that she was married to a rich billionaire back home. I tried to include her in our conversation, but she just waved us off the entire time. Jake did nothing to help me out. He just laughed with his parents and went along with their thoughts. Dave and Sandra both criticized me a lot during their stay. They thought I spent too much money on makeup and skincare. They said that I shouldn't buy nice things when I wasn't contributing enough to the household. They thought my stuff was coming out of Jake's pockets. I tried to reassure them about everything, but they didn't seem to believe me. It didn't help that Jake constantly said things against me, even when it wasn't true. He said, "You know, Tina was a struggling student when we met, so I had to pay for everything. She has a job now, but it's not enough to fund her luxury lifestyle. Jake, we split our bills, remember? I'd buy my stuff. I'm confused. Why are you saying these things? I lived a simple life before and even after we started a relationship. I don't have any interest in luxury goods or brands. The only luxury products I have were gifted by you." Even then, I used to scold him for spending so much money. He simply said that a man of his status should always give expensive gifts. Now I realize it was done so that he can gloat to his friends about how much he had spent on me. When they left, I already had a bad taste in my mouth. I did ask Jake about what happened. He just shrugged it off and tried to play it down altogether. "You're thinking too much, Tina. You should just take their words lightheartedly. They meant well." "What they said was disrespect for you, Jake. I already feel bad for taking gifts from you in college. I'm trying to put in the same effort now." "Relax, you're overreacting. They don't know everything, so let it be." 6 months went by, and Jake proposed to me. I was super happy because I genuinely loved him with all my heart. We planned an engagement party, which again was split evenly. I was working on my small business on the side, which prospered in under a year. Jake knew about this and was happy for me. He never asked how much I made, so I never told him. To him, it was a small hobby that didn't bring in much money, if at all. However, I decided that it was time I started treating myself a little. That is why I decided on a big engagement party. Jake also went along with it just fine. We split all the expenses equally because it was an expensive party. I wanted Jake to meet my extended family, so I also paid for their plane ticket so that they could come. On the day of the engagement party, they said, "You know, Tina, you shouldn't have splurged so much at this party. You're already draining Jake's account before you're even married. At this rate, you'll be out of money and have to settle for a backyard wedding. I thought you were financially irresponsible. Turns out it's worse than I thought." "Yeah, I told her the party was over the top. It was so unnecessary to have your family flying from other states. I can't believe how much this party cost. I can already feel my wallet getting lighter." "What are you talking about? We mutually agreed to this party. I paid for my share of the party as well. It was your idea to include everyone so that we can meet them as a couple. You know, Tina, you insisted so much I couldn't say no. I usually don't mind spending, but Jesus, this party cost us a lot. So, you have already started to manipulate my boy into paying money. Jake is so sweet. He just can't say no to you. You should have fought better. I can see I was right about what kind of girl you are." "That's very disrespectful, Sandra. I didn't extort money out of your son. Having a big party was actually his idea first. We had countless discussions before we put down the money. I was so shocked by his behavior that I'd excused myself and took a breather. I went out to the lawn of the venue only to find Cassie and her husband Jim laughing about me there. They didn't even stop when they noticed me. I felt that my engagement party was ruined. Jake was having a blast while I had to deal with his family's judgments. Most of his extended family didn't even know that I work. They thought I was a jobless fiancé who is dependent on Jake. My mom then came over when she noticed how sad I was. Mom is extremely protective of me. She raised me as a single parent and knows how hard it is to manage finances. Another thing about my mom is that she doesn't take disrespect, even when it's directed towards her child. She told me, "Tina, I think you should really rethink the engagement. I have been hearing your in-laws' mean comments the entire party. You can't let them hurt you like that. I don't know why they are doing this. Even Jake is going along with their horrible notions about me. You need to sit down and have a talk with Jake. It's time for you to have a serious conversation with him." After the party was over, I did take up my concerns with Jake. He simply made it seem like he was joking around. Jake also told me that he loves me and doesn't care if I break the bank, but I was paying for everything else except rent. I reiterated my wish to pay some rent, but he brushed me off again. The wedding planning was equally stressful. His parents kept criticizing my choices and said, "Tina, you're spending way too much money. You need to stop bankrupting my son. He is not your cash cow." That's a horrible thing to say, Sandra. We are both paying for the wedding, along with my mom. You are not contributing anything. So, robbing my son was not enough for you? Did you expect us to empty the bank account for you as well? I'm not asking for money, Dave. I'm simply telling you that we can pay for this wedding just fine. On the day of the wedding, Cassie also kept commenting on how I overspent on my dress and makeup. I told her that my mom paid for these things, but she didn't listen. The ceremony went well, but during the reception, Sandra and Dave kept bringing up how I spent too much money and bled their son dry. I didn't want them to spoil my wedding like they did with the engagements, so I kept quiet. Things were suspiciously calm after the wedding, however. That would soon change for me and his family. After a few months, Jake received a big promotion at work. He was looking forward to the promotion and wanted to celebrate it with family. Jake insisted on a big dinner party to which both sides of our family were invited. I was super happy for him and said, "I want this dinner to be extra special, Jake. I'm extremely proud of you and want to give you a little treat. I have decided that I will pay for the dinner party completely." "Seriously, but where will you get so much money?" "Don't worry, Jake. My business is doing well and I have a salary for my job. Plus, I finally gained access to a trust fund from my paternal grandfather." Jake was extremely happy about my decision and the fact that the party was on me. I even planned the entire thing so you didn't have to do anything. I booked a large venue and got the best caterers for the food. Everyone was impressed by what I had arranged. The ambiance was happy and cheerful. However, that was before his family arrived. They looked at the preparations and were not happy about it. I didn't understand what was wrong since everyone else said it was perfect. It soon became clear what their problem was. During the speeches, Sandra stood up and loudly said, "I thank everyone for gathering here to celebrate my son. As you all know, he's an incredibly hard-working man and also very generous. He deserves this promotion completely. However, his luck just ended there. It is sad that out of all people he was shackled down by a gold digger. I wish he had the foresight to see what his wife is. Then he wouldn't have to work so hard to find her a luxury life." Yeah, I'm sure it's now clear to everyone that his wife is a big spender. From the engagement party to this dinner, she pretty much emptied his accounts. I feel sorry for my poor boy. I'm glad he made Tina sign the prenup before the wedding. That way, at least some of his assets would be saved. Seriously, the way my wife spends, you'd think we would be on the streets by now. Thankfully, I can earn enough to keep a trophy wife. It's a shame I can't spend money on myself since there is none left for me. Jake, you really did mess up by marrying her. Jim would never have accepted a gold digger like that. I take good care of my finances because I don't want my husband to be homeless. People don't care as long as they can buy expensive things. What are you saying? Do you guys think I am a gold digger? I mean, it must be clear to everyone by now. You know your lifestyle is quite damaging to my bank account. I would have divorced her sooner, man. Your one patient husband. Watch out before you land on the streets. That's enough, Jake. Why are you saying these things? You don't pay for my lifestyle, I do. I pay for the entire party by myself. You don't even give me gifts anymore. Oh my God, bro. This one is a gold digger and a liar as well. Everyone just kept laughing at what they said. At this point, I knew exactly what I needed to do. So I held my head high and said, "Since I am such a gold digger to you, let me just show you my bank balance. I guess that will clear things up for you." I then showed everyone my bank balance. No way. You have to be lying. Did you steal my son's money, Jake? Just look at this. She must have stolen from you. I don't need to steal money from your son. This is all my blood and sweat. Also, I recently got access to my trust fund. It was left to me by my grandfather. I was going to get a bigger house with it and surprise Jake. I guess that won't be happening anymore. What do you mean? We can still buy the house. It'll be a lovely gift. After watching you join your family and calling me names, this is not happening. Your family has been insulting me for too long. You never once stood up for me. Instead, you made up these lies about how I'm using your money. Listen, you're overreacting. No, I am not overreacting. All the people here know what your family has been calling me. They were here when you let them insult me during our engagement party. I will no longer tolerate this disrespect from you. I want a divorce. No, Tina. Just listen to me. Jake, I would suggest you keep your mouth shut. You never defended my girl these years. You were even cruel enough to join in with your family. Anything you say at this point will be laughable. It's time she ends the toxic relationship for good. With that, we left the party. All the invitees were shocked and were whispering to each other. I realized that I had exposed him to his extended family, friends, and work colleagues. However, I didn't care anymore. I was done with him. All these years of crime because of their insults got to me. I couldn't live with him anymore. I deserve someone who respects me. Mom and I went straight to the house and collected my belongings. Jake kept blowing up my phone to try and talk to me. I simply muted it and kept going. I went to stay with my mother. When I made it home, I broke down as I started to realize what had happened. Even after giving me so much love, my marriage ended. But I wasn't going to look back. The next day, I got in touch with my cousin, who is a lawyer. He was at the party, so he already saw it coming. I asked him to draw up divorce papers. Since we have a prenuptial, the split would be easy. I won't even have to give him money, even though I have a lot more than him now. Jake kept trying to contact me throughout the day. He and his family even showed up at my mom's place and said, "I need to talk to Tina. She can't leave me like this. Let me talk to her. You need to get off my property. She doesn't want to talk to you, let alone see your face. She has to talk to me. We won't leave until she comes out to talk. This is not over. Jake, go back. We are not having this discussion. I am not giving you a chance. You and your family can eat rocks. Now get lost before we call the police." Jake went home, but kept sending texts and voicemails. They ranged from sobbing to screaming and threatening me with harm. He said, "Tina, please don't do this to me. You know how much I love you. Please come back. I didn't mean to insult you. Forgive me. Tina, stop being stupid. I'm tired of your expletive. If you get the divorce, I will take everything from you. Just wait and see." I stored all the recordings just in case I needed a restraining order. I was a mess, and my mom helped me a lot. Jake even tried to show up at my office as a ditch effort. Good thing I informed the security beforehand, so he was dragged out immediately. It was then that I decided I would quit my job. It paid well, but my business was booming, and I didn't need a job. I wasn't interested in becoming a millionaire. I simply wanted to have a peaceful life with dignity. So, I served my notice that day itself. A week after, Jake was served divorce papers at his work. He was delivered and showed up at my work again. Jake was then told that I had already quit. An ex-colleague of mine told me what happened. However, he didn't stop there. He kept sending flowers and gifts to Mum's address. We returned all those parcels. After another week, the harassment was so severe that I thought about relocating. I was going to buy a house anyway, so with the help of my mother, I found a good house in the next state. It was just perfect for me. I could live there away from my ex, and my mother could also easily reach me when she wants. I'm currently waiting for all my paperwork to be finalized. Since the prenuptial was solid, the judge granted the divorce fairly easily. We did go through 6 months of separation before the judge made the decision. However, I needed that time to get my stuff together. As soon as the divorce was finalized, I moved to my new home. I got a new number because Jake and his family were spamming my old one, from what I heard so far. Jake is a mess and is blaming his parents for ruining his marriage. Jake's professional life also took a hit. His colleagues didn't talk to him anymore, and his seniors are pissed at the bad publicity. It's a small community, so words travel fast. His parents are spreading rumors about me cheating on him. Thankfully, no one believed those lies. They have been telling people that I was a bad person. If these things escalated, I might think about suing for defamation. However, their words have only made them look bad in their community. I, on the other hand, am doing extremely well. I'm spending time bettering my business and finally getting to enjoy my life. I've even started going out and have been on a few dates. Jake did give me a lot of insecurity, so I'm careful about getting committed too fast. However, I am hopeful I will heal in the future and finally find someone who will cherish me.
My husband had been unreachable for almost 3 days. He said, "I won't reply for a while," but my concerns were growing. I thought I should contact the police soon. Just as I was thinking that, I got a call from one of my subordinates. "Ma'am, your husband passed away in an accident." Huh? Why did she call me? I couldn't think about that right now. I hurried to the hospital. There I saw my husband's unrecognizable body. My name is Harper, 28 years old. I got married 2 years ago and live with my husband while working at an iced tea company. We want to have children someday, but not yet. My husband's name is Christopher, 2 years older than me. He is very dedicated to his job. Just the other day, there was talk of him getting a promotion. That day, as soon as he got home from work, he happily rushed up to me. "Harper, listen, I might get a position soon." "Really? That's amazing." "Yeah, I'm so happy. It's been tough, but I'm glad I worked hard." My husband was so dedicated to his job that he gave up his days off to work. He'd often worked late and came home just before the date changed. I worried about his heavy workload at times, but finally it paid off. Seeing my husband so happy made me feel happy too. I can't lose either, I thought. I'll try harder too. However, since that day, I started to notice something off about Christopher. His overtime increased even more, and he wouldn't come home until after midnight. His weekend work, which used to be only a few times a month, gradually increased. Last month, he went to work even on Saturdays. Not only that, but I felt his attitude towards me had become somewhat cold. We used to go out on our days off, but that stopped recently. Isn't that strange? Why doesn't he seem at all tired despite working so hard? Concerned, I decided to suddenly ask my husband about it. I waited for him to come home late from work and brought up the conversation. "Hey, Christopher, can I talk to you for a minute?" "What? I'm tired and want to sleep. Lately, you're always on your phone before bed even though you come home late. Aren't you getting sleep deprived?" "What are you trying to say now? How I spend my free time is my business, right?" That might be true, but are you really that busy with work? At my question, his expression stiffened for a moment. Not missing that, I pressed him further. I understand you have a lot to do since you got promoted, but isn't it too hard? You have too many weekend work days, and isn't it bad for the company to overwork employees? I have no choice. I'm not doing overtime and weekend work because I want to. But isn't it too much? You don't understand my job, Harper, do you? Don't butt in when I'm tired from work. With that, Christopher left the living room. After that, my uneasy feelings didn't go away. Then one day I usually commuted by car, but on my way home from work, I got into an accident. I was rear-ended by another car and taken to the hospital by ambulance. I had bruises all over my body. After several tests to be safe, I was told to stay in the hospital for a few days. I called my husband, however. No matter how many times I called, he didn't answer, and he didn't reply to the messages. You should be done with work by now, so why until now? We could at least exchange messages during his overtime. I kept calling him every few minutes, and it finally connected an hour later. As I tried to explain the situation, he let out a big sigh. "Oh, you're so persistent. Can't you tell I'm working overtime? If I don't answer the phone, I'm sorry, but that's not the issue right now." "Huh, what do you mean?" "Actually, I got into an accident on my way home, and I'm in the hospital now. My whole body hurts, but they said there's no life-threatening injuries." "An accident? Oh, what a pain you're causing." I involuntarily let out a ha at his unexpected response. He continued mercilessly as I was at a loss for words. "Stop getting into accidents when I'm busy. I'm not paying for the car repairs, all right?" "I understand, but I need you to bring me a change of clothes." "What? Why do I have to do that? I'm tired from work, and it's like a punishment game to go to the hospital for someone who got into an accident due to carelessness." "Carelessness? Why are you talking like that? Besides, it wasn't my fault. It was the other driver's." "Stop nagging. Anyway, I'm not going, and I won't reply for a while. Figure it out yourself." The call ended there, the busy town echoing in my ear, pushing my heart to the limit. Before I knew it, I was in tears. Why did he speak like that? Aren't you worried about your wife who had an accident? He used to prioritize me over work. If I could, I'd want to get a change of clothes myself. My parents lived far away, so I can't ask for their help. I sent several messages to my husband afterward, but he never brought my things. I had no choice but to buy everything I needed at the hospital store. Since then, I tried contacting my husband a few times, but 3 days had passed without a reply. He said he wouldn't reply for a while, but I was getting worried. No matter what, it's unusual not to have any contact for this long. What if he got into an accident too? That anxiety crossed my mind. That's when I heard a knock on the hospital room door. When I responded with yes, my coworker Jasmine, who I usually get along with, came to visit me. "Jasmine, you came. Thank you. I was surprised when I heard you had been in an accident after I contacted you since you hadn't been at work for a while." "It's not a big deal, just some bruises and a broken bone. It's more than enough. But I'm glad you seem to be doing well." For a while we chatted and laughed about trivial things. As visiting hours were ending, Jasmine started to get ready to leave. But then she stopped and looked troubled. I cautiously asked her, "Jasmine, what's wrong?" "I'm sorry, Harper. I don't think I should say this now, but I saw it." "Saw what? Did you see?" "I saw your husband walking with Daisy." "When did that happen?" 3 days ago. The Daisy Jasmine mentioned was a junior coworker at our company. I had been her mentor when she was a new employee. Even now, a few years later, we'd go to lunch together once a week. Why would she be with Christopher? Daisy and my husband should have last met at our wedding. Could it be? But there's no way they would do something like that. Despite thinking it was impossible, the worst-case scenario crossed my mind. According to Jasmine, she saw my husband with a suitcase and Daisy 3 days ago. Since then, Daisy has been on paid leave. I hesitantly called my husband's office, and my suspicion was confirmed. He had also applied for paid leave 3 days ago. At that moment, my suspicion turned to certainty. My beloved husband and the junior I cared for being betrayed by both of them at the same time. Probably my husband's increased overtime and working on weekends, or because he was meeting her. No, maybe they were already involved before that. As I recalled my husband's suspicious behavior, more and more things started to make sense. Oh, so that's why he became so cold. Surprisingly, it all made sense to me. Unconsciously, I called my husband. I hardly contacted him these past few days, thinking he wouldn't respond anyway. He probably wouldn't pick up after just a few attempts, but I couldn't just let him do as he pleased. I kept ringing his phone until he answered 30 minutes after I started calling. My husband finally answered, sounding annoyed. "What's your problem?" "I told you I wouldn't answer for a while." "Why are you so busy that you can't even answer a call from your wife? Of course I'm working every day, even though you're on paid leave until tomorrow. What kind of work are you doing?" Assuming he hadn't been caught yet, my husband hesitated for a moment. Still thinking he could deceive me, he quickly started making excuses. "What? What are you talking about? I didn't take any paid leave." No use playing dumb. I already confirmed with the company. "No, well, actually, I just suddenly wanted to take it easy. I've been relaxing at home these past few days." "Oh, really? With Daisy? Even preparing a suitcase?" I already know everything. Just confess." I couldn't help but raise my voice. Then my husband, realizing he couldn't hide it any longer, revealed his true colors. So you found out. Yes, I'm on a trip with Daisy. Now that you know, stop bothering me, you ugly woman." "So that's how it is. Why? Why with Daisy? Why do you think she's younger and cuter than you?" "For such a reason. Enough already. I'm having fun on this trip. Don't bother me. Don't worry. I'll divorce you when I get back." Laughter. He said, "See ya," and hung up the phone. It was right after that the love that I had for my husband turned into hatred in an instant. I can't forgive him. To be betrayed in such a terrible way, I won't let them have their way. I'll definitely send them to hell. That's when I decided to take revenge on them. But before I could take matters into my own hands, divine punishment would come to them. The next day, I was discharged from the hospital and started to regain some mobility. To prepare for my revenge, I opened my smartphone to search for a lawyer's office. Just then, my phone rang and Daisy's name appeared on the screen, my husband's affair partner. I was surprised for a moment, but I couldn't run away now. I gathered my courage and answered the call. "Hello. Mom, sorry. I'm so sorry. Isn't it common sense to apologize in person?" Yes, you're right, but that's not the point right now." "Huh." Daisy's voice was somewhat shaky. Then she said something that made me doubt my ears. "Your husband has died in an accident." "What?" I was so shocked that I couldn't find the right words. Confused, I barely managed to respond to Daisy. "He's dead. What are you talking about?" "Christopher is on a cheating trip with you, isn't he?" Yes, that's true. But on the way home, Christopher got caught in an accident. According to Daisy's story, it seems the two of them were in an accident on their way home from the airport. Christopher was hit by a car, and although an ambulance was called right away, he didn't move a muscle. To my surprise, the hospital Christopher was taken to was the same one I was staying at. I quickly hung up the phone, explained the situation to the nurse, and headed to my husband's side. I had to move using crutches as my broken bone hadn't fully healed. Since I heard he had died, I assumed I'd be taken to a morgue or something, but incredibly, Christopher was still alive. However, he was seriously injured. Just after I arrived, a breathless Daisy rushed in. Seeing Christopher lying in the bed, she collapsed on the spot when she realized he was still alive. I had a lot to say, but unfortunately, Christopher was in critical condition. I told Daisy we'd talk later, and we each went home that day. Days later, Christopher barely pulled through, but the accident left him paralyzed from the waist down, forcing him into a wheelchair. My in-laws were furious when they found out about the affair trip. Although they must have felt something seeing their challenged son, they scolded him, clearly saying, "You brought this on yourself by having an affair." After my in-laws left, I called Daisy and decided to have a talk with her and my husband. When I arrived at my husband's hospital room, they were having a loud argument. "If you hadn't pushed me that time, none of this would have happened. It's all your fault." "What? You're the one who wanted to take that route. Don't blame me. What did you say in the first place? This happened because you wanted to go on a trip. I paid for everything. Give me my money back. Pay for the treatment, you lousy woman. You hurt the man you love, so you should pay right. Don't be ridiculous. Hey, we got serious with a guy like you. This was just a fling. I'll never see you again." The two of them carried on their unbearable argument, apparently not realizing I was there. I couldn't take it anymore. I forcibly opened the door to the hospital room, took a deep breath, and shouted at them. "Enough! It's because you had an affair in the first place that this happened. Take your blame game somewhere else." Harper. "Ma'am." Finally realizing I was there, their faces quickly stiffened. Ignoring their confusion, I continued, "How can you still argue in a situation like this? Do you even understand the situation you're in now?" Christopher was the first to answer that question. "Harper, don't worry. I'm breaking up with this stupid woman." So I realized that it's always been you for me, Harper. Huh. What are you saying now? We're getting divorced, right?" "What?" I couldn't help but burst into laughter at my husband's dumbfounded expression. Laughter. "Didn't you say it? When I get home, we'll get a divorce, or what? Now that you've fought with your affair partner, you want to stay married to me. Are you an idiot? There's no way I'd spend my life with a piece of trash like you." "Harper, why? Didn't you love me?" "Don't mess with me. Who betrayed that love first? It was you. After all that talk about getting a divorce, you want to get back together when it's convenient for you. I'm not as cheap as you think. If you understand that, never show up in front of me again. Keep regretting this for the rest of your life, you jerk." My husband was stunned by my yelling, and Daisy was pale and trembling. Later, I was discharged from the hospital and decided to stay at my parents' house for a while. After that, my divorce from Christopher was finalized through a lawyer. I demanded alimony from him and Daisy, which they paid in full. Christopher was fired from his job due to this incident. It turned out he had been using company money for their affair. Adding to his paralysis, he was easily dismissed. All that remained for him was a claim for damages from the company. Finding a new job with his condition would probably be difficult. It didn't take long for word of Daisy's affair with my husband to spread throughout the company. She was met with cold stares and eventually couldn't stand the atmosphere, beginning to skip work without permission. As a result, I heard she finally submitted her resignation. Now those two will probably never lead a decent life again. Even so, I don't feel sorry for them. This is a disaster they brought upon themselves. As for me, I rented an apartment near my workplace and started a new life. Many colleagues showed concern or curiosity, but honestly, my feelings are mixed, and I can't describe how I feel. Such trivial rumors will probably die down soon. Now I want to enjoy my life without being swayed by others.
Didn't you go for a walk with a guy today? Together, you two looked fantastic. Are you two becoming quite close? It was James, my coworker, of course. Sophia, my wife, is undoubtedly aware of that as well. I can't help but blame Sophia because I feel like I could lose control due to this overwhelming sense of emptiness. I remarked sarcastically. Sophia didn't deny it. She said nothing, just glanced down. So, you're essentially stating that I'm correct by remaining silent. Huh. I appreciate everything. Be with him, please. Later, I'll mail your belongings. I turned Sophia out of the house after that. An even greater sensation of grief descended upon me when I secured the front door. Since Sophia will be happier living with James, it is likely that she will do so. I went back to the living room and started reading up on the divorce procedure. I told David, my supervisor, that I was leaving the next week. Explaining my predicament and what had transpired was difficult, but I knew I had to do it if I wanted to go on. I completed all of my work while James was out on field work because I didn't want to confront him. Now I have a whole new life ahead of me. I prepare myself to face it. Michael is my name. I work as a systems engineer and am in my 40s. Although Sophia and I are not yet parents, we have been living together contentedly, and I am happy with my life. Since Sophia is around 10 years younger than I am, people frequently make fun of me by remarking that although she appears youthful, I actually have a more immature mindset because of her poise and mature approach. However, my dear wife has recently been in a somewhat difficult predicament. James, a coworker of mine, apparently fell in love with Sophia right away when I invited him around for dinner a while ago. James behaves normally around me, of course, but I just recently found out that he has been covertly contacting her. Sophia once asked me, "Hey, are you pushing yourself to finish work early?" as she gave me a worried look during our supper. I've heard that things are difficult at the moment. She mentioned my work so abruptly, which shocked me, and I had a query. Work has been hectic, to be sure, but Sophia would never be aware of the details. Why would she suddenly say something like that? I questioned her about it. Remember how I once mentioned that James kept contacting me? Sophia asked me, looking disturbed. He told me you're having a difficult time, and he still does. James is known for having troubled relationships. What on earth is he thinking, keeping in contact with the wife of his coworker? I reprimanded Sophia because I was annoyed by his actions. Don't be concerned about my job. Additionally, James only contacts you because you're too kind. It's okay to ignore him. Don't even bother answering. I'm hoping you're not the one contacting him. Of course not, Sophia said, sulking a little, and held up her phone to me. You see, he has never received a message from me. Furthermore, it would only cause tension between you two at work if you ignored him. I'm worried about you more. Sophia is genuinely so kind, wording less about the inconvenience James causes her and more about whether her cold responses might affect my work environment. I appreciated her thoughtfulness, but then I noticed something strange in her text history with James. He'd sent messages claiming I'd made an impossible mistake at work and even said I'd been flirting with female coworkers, which was a total fabrication. What's this about? Sure, things have been hectic at work, but I haven't made any big mistakes or messed around with anyone. As I tried to clear my name, Sophia chuckled softly. Don't worry, I trust you. Why would I believe James's word over yours? If anything, it's shocking he'd think I would. Seeing Sophia pretending to cry in that theatrical way, I let out a relieved laugh. You're right. Once I finished her homemade meal, I felt both full and at ease. Thanks. That was delicious. I'll turn in early tonight to be ready for tomorrow. Sophia smiled softly, saying, Have a good rest, as she began clearing the table. As I coughed, maybe from something getting caught in my throat, Sophia hurried over with a cup of tea. Are you okay? Honestly, you're like a kid. Chew properly before you swallow, all right. She rubbed her stomach as she said this, and I gave her a warning too. Are you constipated again, Sophia? You need to chew properly, or it'll affect your digestion, I said. For a moment, Sophia's expression seemed to twist, but she quickly smiled again, so maybe I imagined it. As she efficiently went about her household chores, I told her good night and headed to the bedroom. The next day at work, I decided to approach James and say something. Good morning. Seems like my wife's been getting a lot of attention from you lately. I appreciate you looking out for her, but she's pretty busy, so maybe take it down a notch. I thought it was a light jab, but James played innocent, acting as if he knew nothing. What are you talking about? I haven't seen Sophia since we had dinner at your place. I couldn't help feeling irritated, so I addressed it more directly. Don't play dumb. You're messaging her every day. You keep this up, and you're going to miss your chance to settle down seriously. James shrugged with a playful expression and waved his hand in front of his face. Oh yeah, that's right. Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not trying to get close to Sophia. Honestly, I'm too busy with other girls and mixers to even think about that. Saying this without a hint of shame, James then continued, I almost forgot. Right, a woman from accounting wanted me to listen to some of her concerns tonight. Michael, want to come along? I don't want people getting the wrong impression with just the two of us out. Considering James's reputation, a one-on-one drink with a female coworker would definitely spark rumors regardless of their intentions. Plus, James's drinking habits aren't the best, so it wouldn't hurt to supervise. I texted Sophia, letting her know I'd be home late due to an urgent matter. We agreed to meet after work. We met at a pub, and I was relieved that her problem was simply feeling left behind amid a surge of marriage-minded friends. Maybe the drinks were getting to him. James suddenly spilled his beer, accidentally soaking her blouse. Are you all right? Let me get a clean towel right away, I said, standing up to help. James handed me a towel. Here, this one's clean. Since I caused it, I'll grab another, he said, standing up to look for a waiter. The female coworker, maybe a bit tipsy, was slowly dabbing at her clothes. I tried to avoid touching her as I wiped down the table and cleaned any lingering moisture on my arm. After a short while, James returned with a few fresh towels. Sorry for the wait. Here, use these. Once things had settled down, we resumed our food and drinks. Both seemed pretty buzzed, but looked like they were just old friends, so I didn't worry. Seeing it was time to wrap up, I picked up the tab and stood up. Thanks for a good evening. I'll be heading out. I'll cover this round, so if you order more, take care of that, all right. I stopped the female coworker from paying and headed to the cashier. Once I had settled the bill, I went straight home. When I got back around 11:00 p.m., normally Sophia would already be asleep, but I noticed the light in the living room was on. Assuming she'd stayed up late, I stepped inside and found her sitting seriously in a chair. I'm back. Were you waiting for me? Sorry for being late, I said. With the TV off, she'd probably been waiting for me to return. I apologized, but Sophia shook her head slowly. I couldn't sleep, thinking things over. I want to trust you, but can you explain this? She said, handing me her phone. I was shocked by what I saw on the screen. It was a picture of me from earlier at the pub. The sender was James. Being photographed wasn't the issue. It was the situation in the image that posed a problem. To anyone else, it looked like I had my hand on the female coworker's body. Of course, knowing the context, I knew there was no issue, but to an outsider, it could easily appear as if we were cozying up. Before I could explain, Sophia scrolled further on the screen. Is this true? I want to hear it straight from you, she said. Seeing the words on her messaging app, I was taken aback even more. The message had read, I spotted him out drinking with a female coworker. He's always close with her. There's no way that's true. James was there too. He wasn't just there by coincidence either. I was invited by him, I protested. Sophia believed me right away, though I knew there must still be some lingering doubts in her mind. Then an idea struck me. I opened my wallet. Sure enough, the receipt listed the number of guests, and it clearly said 3. See? The receipt here shows the number of people. James is playing a seriously twisted prank. I'll talk to him about this tomorrow, I said. As I coughed lightly while saying this, Sophia finally looked relieved. It's just James messing around. But that cough has been dragging on for a while now. Maybe you should get it checked out over the weekend. Anyway, I'll head to bed, Sophia said. After she disappeared into the bedroom, I decided to take a shower. The next day, I confronted James, who, true to form, casually shrugged and said, "I was just kidding around. I didn't think it would turn into such a big deal. It was clearly the kind of prank that could escalate." But James seemed to lack that kind of awareness. I made sure James understood he needed to cut it out, making him promise not to send Sophia any more messages that would cause her concern. That weekend, since my cough hadn't improved, I followed Sophia's advice and went to the doctor. On the way back, as I sat on a bench looking up at the overcast sky, trying to clear my head, an unbelievable scene caught my eye. Across the street, I saw Sophia and James walking together, looking friendly. Curious about where they were headed, I decided to follow them discreetly. They entered a side alley and walked into a building. The sign read Private Karaoke Rooms. After thinking things over, I sighed and headed back home. A few hours later, Sophia returned, looking cheerful. As I silently watched her, she sat down across from me and asked, "What's wrong? You were out with a guy today, right? You looked really good together. You two seem pretty close, don't you?" I said, referring to James. Surely, Sophia understood that too. On the verge of being consumed by a sense of loss, I couldn't help but accuse her with a bitter tone. Sophia didn't deny it. She simply looked down and stayed silent. "So by staying quiet, you're basically admitting I'm right, aren't you? Thanks for everything. Go be with him if you want. I'll send your stuff over," I said. With that, I sent Sophia out of the house. As I locked the door, an even heavier sadness pressed down on me. Sophia would likely go live with James now. She would undoubtedly be happier that way. Returning to the living room, I started gathering information for the divorce process. The following week, I informed David of my decision to resign. Explaining the situation and what had happened was painful, but I knew it was necessary to move forward. Not wanting to face James, I wrapped up all my tasks while he was out in the field. A completely new life awaited me now. I steeled myself to face it head-on. The apartment felt far too spacious without Sophia. Since I was changing jobs and didn't feel like staying in the same neighborhood, I looked for a smaller, more affordable place. Moving out by myself was both physically taxing and emotionally draining, but I managed. I felt ready to start my new solo life. As I settled into my new place, my cough was finally diagnosed. After 6 months of treatment, I had made a full recovery and found a new job. Life was fulfilling again. Fortunately, I found a coworker who felt like a close friend despite our age difference. His name was Alex, a helpful colleague who'd shown me the ropes since I joined. He was around Sophia's age. Perhaps I chuckled at myself for still measuring things by Sophia, even after the divorce. One day, Alex came to me with an unexpected suggestion. "Michael, you're free this Christmas, right? Want to join me for a mixer?" The sudden proposal made me burst out laughing. "Are you seriously asking if I'm free on Christmas? You're rude." "Well, yeah, I am free, but I'll pass. It'd be boring with an old guy like me. You go have fun with the younger crowd." Alex shook his head and insisted with unusual enthusiasm. "Michael, you're a great conversationalist and a good listener. To tell you the truth, I always end up running the show with these group dates, so I never get to enjoy myself. Michael, I'm counting on you." Seeing Alex put his hands together in a pleading gesture made me smile despite myself. I'd only been going back and forth between work and home lately, so if it would help Alex out, maybe a little change of pace wouldn't be so bad. "All right, I'll join this time, but only for the first round. An older guy like me doesn't have the stamina for more. I'll be heading home after that." When I said this, Alex beamed like a kid. "Thanks, Michael. I owe you one." I'll follow you forever." He was charming, but also a bit of a smooth talker. I felt a bit embarrassed, nearly scratching my head, but I held back. On the day of the mixer, the town was bustling with couples. I headed to the meeting spot in front of the restaurant. Alex and another younger coworker were waiting for me, and we entered together. The women were already seated, but I was stunned to see a completely unexpected person. Sophia was there. After nearly a year of not seeing each other, both Sophia and I couldn't help but act a bit awkwardly. Noticing this, Alex glanced between us and murmured, "Could it be? Do you two know each other? You look like a great-looking couple. What's the story here?" I was momentarily distracted by the strange feeling that something was different about Sophia's hair, so I responded a beat late. Sophia was also looking at me, but when our eyes met, she quickly looked away apologetically. One of the other women, who seemed to know some background, suggested, "Maybe you two should go to a different place to catch up." Alex, likely picking up on the vibe, tried to help out in his own way. He agreed with the woman's suggestion, smiling as he said, "If it's been a while, you must have a lot to catch up on. Go ahead and enjoy yourselves." Going with the flow, Sophia and I ended up leaving together. We chose a restaurant a little farther away where we could sit and have a meal together. "I'm surprised, but are you really okay with coming to something like this? James is not exactly the easygoing type when it comes to jealousy," I commented. Sophia nodded with a slight chuckle. "You're so right. Even back when we were living together, he acted as if I was his girl, even though I had no interest in him." Puzzled by her words, I couldn't help but ask a more probing question. "So, how are things with James? Are you two not getting along?" Sophia laughed and answered, "Getting along? There's nothing between me and James. He still won't stop pestering me, and it's exhausting trying to avoid him." I had assumed they'd been living together, so her answer left me speechless. Sensing my reaction, Sophia said, "Actually," and began to explain. Rubbing her stomach, Sophia revealed she'd been experiencing mysterious abdominal pain and had gone to the hospital for tests. It was then she discovered she was facing a serious illness. If she pursued treatment, she wouldn't be able to have children. She had struggled with that decision. She knew I'd always wanted kids, and she herself had been hoping to start a family soon, so it was a huge blow. Feeling that she couldn't fulfill my hopes if we stayed married, she started blaming herself. After agonizing over it, Sophia concluded it would be better for me if we separated. That's when, with some guilt, she decided to involve James in her plan. On the day I went to the hospital, Sophia and James had intentionally planned to walk by right where I'd see them. They had orchestrated it together to make it easier for me to bring up divorce. Apparently, Sophia had told James, "I have no intention of dating you. I just want to separate from my husband." But since the divorce was convenient for James as well, he gladly agreed to help. After she explained everything, Sophia looked at me, her eyes full of concern. "More importantly, could it be that you are?" Seeing her worried expression, I smiled and reassured her. "I'm fine." In truth, I had also been diagnosed with a serious illness, just as she had. The cough that wouldn't go away had led me to get checked. Fortunately, it was caught early, but at the time, I was filled with anxiety, not knowing what the future held. Even if we'd had children, I might not have been able to be there to raise them, and that would have left Sophia to bear the burden alone. That wouldn't have been fair to her or to the child. At the time, when I was struggling with these doubts, I happened to see Sophia and James walking together, looking close. Half out of a sense of resignation, I convinced myself that stepping aside was the best way for Sophia to be happy. But after learning that Sophia had been carrying her own burdens, I realized how much we had lacked communication and felt regret. Reflecting on this, I asked Sophia, "You noticed my illness because of my hair, didn't you? Looks like we're in the same boat." I'd felt something was off when I saw Sophia after so long. I realized she was wearing a wig. She must have immediately recognized my hair as artificial, just as I had with hers. After my hair loss due to the treatment's side effects, I'd gained an almost instinctive ability to tell natural hair from wigs, a sensitivity many people with similar experiences seem to develop. As we talked, the misunderstandings between Sophia and me dissolved, and it felt like our previous closeness was coming back. While we were enjoying our meal together, a man suddenly sat down at our table. It was hard to get you to make time, so I came to see you myself. Imagine my surprise finding you having dinner with your ex-husband on Christmas, James said in an unsettling tone. Sophia had told me James was still pestering her, but I hadn't expected him to show up here. But how did he know we were here? Curious, I asked James, "How did you find us? We didn't plan to come here, so there's no way you'd know." I glanced at Sophia, who looked just as confused. James smirked, raising one corner of his mouth as he replied, "It's none of your business. But fine, I'll tell you. When I borrowed Sophia's phone the other day, I installed a location tracking app. We're close enough to share our phones, you know." Upon hearing this, Sophia quickly checked her phone, looking distressed. Her face turned pale as she found what he was referring to. "Is this it? How dare you do something like this without my permission?" Sophia, rarely one to show much emotion, was visibly angry. Even James looked taken aback. He scrambled to make excuses, trying to cover it up. "When you left your phone on the table to go to the restroom, I figured. I mean, we're close, so there's no need to be so upset, right?" At this, Sophia finally seemed to reach her limit. "Just leave, and don't ever show up in front of us again." "I want to try again with Michael," she said. Then she took my hand and stood up. As we left, I glanced back to see James sitting at the table with a devastated expression on his face. Sophia has since consulted an attorney of James' behavior. The investigation has uncovered various stalking behaviors, like tampering with her mail and following her, and it's likely he will face some form of punishment. According to a former coworker, James' misconduct had reached his boss, David, and the company had begun to view it as a serious issue. Female employees, in particular, had started to openly avoid him, and reports of his inappropriate behavior continued to pile up. Uncomfortable with the situation, James eventually disappeared from the company. Though he may feel safe from work repercussions, his actions towards Sophia could result in criminal charges. Installing a GPS app on someone's phone without consent can lead to up to 3 years in prison or a fine of up to $5,000. Though he faces a difficult road, I hope he learns from this and refrains from selfish, unethical actions in his future work. After many discussions, Sophia and I have remarried. We learned the importance of open communication and not keeping secrets. Now, we make an effort to consult each other even on small matters, building a relationship of mutual support. Thankfully, both of us have shown no signs of illness recurrence, and we spend our weekends actively, often traveling. From here on, I believe Sophia and I will support each other through anything life brings. We made a promise to cherish our health and live each day with gratitude.